Whether you love it or loathe it, there's no denying Final Fantasy VII is one of the most recognisable JRPGs in gaming history. Released originally in 1997 for the PS1 and later for the PlayStation 4 and 5 in a to-be finalised 3-part remake with a whole host of additional games, books and movies set in the same universe, there really isn't any escaping its impact no matter how hard you try. Of course, Final Fantasy as a whole was already popular worldwide, but it was VII's initial worldwide release that firmly planted it on the cultural map and introduced a new generation to the franchise. I'm Mol from EXP Required, and today I'll be taking a look at some of FF7's most memorable moments and reflecting on just why it stayed so iconic over the years. Needless to say, there'll be spoilers for the original game ahead. Though the stakes are high from the get-go, the player isn't introduced to the true danger that faces the world until about 5 or 6 hours into the game. Having escaped the city of Midgard by way of an adrenaline-pumping motorbike chase, main boy Cloud finally gets around to introducing invisible threat Sephiroth to the party by way of flashback. 5 years prior to the start of the game, a world-renowned general in Shinra's military travels with a small group of personnel to the mountain town of Nibelheim to terminate some monsters and check in on the local reactor while they're at it. Turns out, if you don't want your katana-wielding war hero descending into madness, you probably shouldn't let him discover his inhuman origins. Sephiroth begins a manic descent into learning about his heritage after seeing humanoid experiments within the reactor, and once he reaches entirely the wrong conclusion, decides he needs to be the one to rule the world. His anguish takes the form of the utter annihilation of the townspeople and setting Nibelheim on fire for good measure, in a cutscene that even non-players of Final Fantasy will recognise after decades of homages, parodies, and plenty of fan art. Much later on in the main game, your path forward leads you back to the town, which has been rebuilt and filled with people that act as though these fiery events never happened. Strange starts to take when all around are peculiar wobbling entities. Optional character Vincent can also be recruited from the same manor basement where Sephiroth chose this dark path, and coming back even later reveals the rest of the truth about the incident in a moving, mostly silent cutscene. For such a quiet town, it sure has generated one hell of a story. We can only imagine what FF7's world would be like had Sephiroth stayed on Shinra's payroll. Of course, it's not just Sephiroth that poses a threat to the world. He's overshadowed and fits and starts by global megacorporation Shinra Incorporated, an electric company turned worldwide ecological threat with their reactors built on every continent to siphon away the planet's energy in the name of supplying the masses with power. We're introduced to FF7's world by way of blowing up one of these reactors, alongside the eco-terrorists, or freedom fighters, Avalanche, who want to stop Shinra in their tracks. There's no denying the uses of electricity, but Avalanche thinks the price isn't worth the prize, and actually succeed in getting rid of one of these reactors within the first hour of gameplay. Their second attempt yields different results, however. The reactor remains intact, and Avalanche's base in the slums is discovered. What follows is a stressful race against the clock as the party tries to prevent Shinra from acting in retaliation. Instead of sending the army in to arrest those responsible, they've decided that dropping the city's plate from above and wiping out an entire sector of the slums below to get back at a small handful of people is the better option. The culmination of this showdown happens mere meters away from the button that'll bring the sky down, and ultimately, you're seconds too slow to stop it from happening. Watching 3 people escape certain death and seeing firsthand their grief at the carnage is offset by the uncaring gaze of the president high above, and later his admission that they won't bother rebuilding what they've destroyed, opting instead to move on to bigger, better things. Yeah, this world definitely sucks. We can only hope we can make it better. While there's moments of reprieve throughout the story, the beginning of Disc 2 doesn't let up for a single moment. Both player and party are mourning the loss of a beloved friend, surrounded by a harsh winterscape, and the only way forward is up a massive cliff infested with Malboros and dragon-like creatures. The culmination of this climb has lead character Cloud's free will eroded in a matter of minutes, and handing over the ultimate destruction magic to the enemy as the icing on top. Helping the party escape from an otherwise certain death is Shinra, the very same one you've been fighting this whole time, and the sequence is capped with a cutscene first introduced in the international version of the game. Massive monsters burst out of the bowels of the planet, and the party speed off without a backwards glance. Utterly incomprehensible to behold on first viewing, these creatures are hellbent on the total eradication of humankind and will stop at nothing to achieve it. Called weapons, and mostly named after natural precious jewels, there are 5 in total, all unique to one another with otherworldly biomechanical designs. The very first you encounter, known as Sapphire, is defeated by a giant weapon in its own right before you ever get a chance to find out just how much of a threat it is, but never fear, you'll still get to face off against the other 4. While you don't defeat it with your own well-honed power, the end of Disc 2 has you battle with Diamond Weapon. Still, we think the true horrors are Emerald and Ruby weapons, FF7's optional super bosses that lurk menacingly just out of sight but never out of mind. But just what are the weapons? Well, the answer can be found at a decades-old terminal in an otherwise unimportant house, along with information on our next entry. First sighted back in Midgar's Shinra Tower, the bizarre entity known as JENOVA keeps cropping up throughout your journey. A shape-shifting, magic-wielding world eater, this lifeform crashed into the planet 2,000 years ago and began a slow but systematic eradication of the majority population at the time, who only barely managed to contain, but not kill it. Not fazed by that initial not-quite-human design, JENOVA's battle sprite is utterly alien and incomparable to most everything else you'll be facing off against. Fought 3 times throughout the story, its name changes each appearance even if its looks don't, to reflect the different stages of the life cycle, with birth, life, and death. As if to highlight the next stage of existence, a 4th form is waiting for you deep within the planet, JENOVA's Synthesis, a flesh-coloured aberration that might well be the creature's true form. Its status as one of the more powerful enemies you'll face is cemented by its ability to cast Ultima, doing so after a short countdown if you can't kill it quick enough. Although we know JENOVA crash-landed on the world, there's no way of telling if it's the only one of its kind. Maybe we really don't want to be going into space after all. For as grand as Midgar is, it arguably doesn't measure up to the imposing outline of Junon, the heart of Shinra's military might, where almost every NPC you meet is a trooper, and the world's biggest gun overshadows your every action. What tragic history there is of the original fishing village below is quickly overshadowed by your entrance to the base on the back of a high-jumping dolphin. Once you start poking around, you're mistaken for a cadet who needs their ass whipped into shape. Didn't you know? President Rufus is here, and we can't make him a laughingstock in front of the world. Your time in the city proper is spent not only entirely in disguise, but mostly on the clock, though your commanding officer has missed the presidential send-off and makes you sneak through back streets into the parade directly, much to the amusement and despair of the live television broadcasters watching. After thoroughly making a fool of yourself, you're given permission to roam around and chat with people who otherwise probably want you in jail. Recurring enemies the Turks can be found enjoying some time off before work, and no one stops you from chatting to every infantryman you can see, even if they're trying to study for exams. It's all capped off neatly with a personal performance for the president, earning you a nice little thank you gift before you sneak aboard his ship, only to learn that everyone else in the party has already done exactly the same thing. You'll be coming back to the Gold Saucer time and time again, but the very first time you arrive is interrupted by tragedy. Rather than be able to enjoy the many attractions at your leisure, a case of mistaken identity has you thrown into jail in the desert below, which just so happens to be the bones of Barret's home, burnt to the ground by Shinra 4 years prior. Thus far, Barret himself has been loud and occasionally aggressive, with his temper flaring the closer you've been getting to the area. Turns out his old friend Dyne is the man behind the gun arm. His victims above landed the party down here. Corel's destruction has left him a changed man, and an emotional one-on-one battle that could be genuinely difficult if you've neglected to level Barret shows us just how he might have turned out had he let the same grief consume him. While victory might be hollow indeed, seeing how dedicated Barret is to those that he truly cares for is an achingly beautiful way to showcase that he's so much more than a tough-talking terrorist. An unrevisitable location, Corel and its tragedy has nonetheless stuck with us over the years as an excellent example of FF7's tragically compelling storytelling. Of course, it can't be forgotten that this emotional segment is immediately followed by your first ever chocobo race, a high-octane, zany method of winning one's freedom from jail. Talk about mood whiplash. Okay, it's impossible to talk about FF7 without mentioning the walking spoiler that everyone and their entire extended family knows about, Aerith's death. The subject of playground discussions, old forums, and now defunct cheat sites, the topic of her potential resurrection has been legendary for decades and reignited in full force with the release of the remake project. It's not just the famous cutscene that stuck with us. The lead up to it's momentous all by itself. By this point, not only does Sephiroth have the means to end the world, but you've just woken from a bizarre dream sequence to find one of your party members missing. Hope you didn't give Aerith your soul ribbon. The only main area in the game you haven't previously visited leads you to a city long dead with crumbling buildings made of bleached coral and strange crystals you can make no sense of. Only when you attempt to sleep can you go further, following impossibly long stairs deep below the earth to a dreamlike altar where Aerith prays. She's then cut down before your very eyes, with no way of helping her until the cutscene ends, and all the while a tear-jerking track simply titled Aerith's theme plays, following dead silence. Watching this cutscene as a kid most certainly changed me irrevocably, but the part that stuck with me most was after the desperate fight with JENOVA, when every member of the party has a different reaction to Aerith's body, all overcome by sadness. Tifa strokes her hair, Red 13 howls mournfully, Yuffie's overcome with tears, and then it's up to Cloud to set her body adrift. Not a single word is spoken during this post-battle scene, forcing your attention on the models themselves, and then unbelievably, impossibly, please enter Disc 2. I hope you enjoyed the look back at some of these memorable moments from Final Fantasy VII. Let us know if you enjoyed these as well, or even if you didn't. We'd love to hear what impacted you the most. Please like, subscribe, and share the video. If you'd like to hear more Final Fantasy discussion, we also have a podcast linked in the description below. Thanks for watching, and see you next time!